when you're making this movie Sorcerer, you are basically untouchable. You have made classics. You have walked among the movie guards for a long time now. The guards are really smiling at you. You go on this journey to make this masterpiece. I will call it a masterpiece. You make the film, you finish the film, and then I want to ask you, when you walk down that gate the morning of the premiere and pick up the LA Times, what was your reaction and what was your expectations like?
I see you've read my book.
Mm-hmm.
The morning after the film opened, I lived in another house, not this one, but I walked down the driveway to get the morning papers. And as I brought them up, I always read the film critic for the Los Angeles Times, who was a good friend of mine. His name was Charles Champlin. Mm. He had given me only great reviews and very intelligent reviews. He was one of the last of the intelligent film critics in America. But he's always, I felt, excessively kind to me. When I opened the paper to his review of Sorcerer, it began with the phrase, "What went wrong?" He completely took the picture apart. And the point is that echoed what all of the other critics around the country did. It was like a massive negative reaction. And at first, I couldn't believe it. I was really surprised because I felt I had made the best of all my films. Mm-hmm. I felt this was the best I can do. And these guys all liked the other stuff, and they promoted it. And very often, the phrases from the critics would be on the marquee of the theaters, mm-hmm. without the name of the star or the director. It would say, 4 stars, Roger Ebert.
Right.
You know, not Sorcerer starring Roy Scheider or anybody else.
But the question is more, what led? So the critics are tearing it to pieces.
Pretty much. There were exceptions.
Right.
Major exceptions, like the critic for Newsweek named
right.
Jack Kroll, who was a very important critic as well. It opened around the time, and I'm not sure, as we talk, whether it opened just before or just after Star Wars. And Star Wars marked a massive sea change in what audiences expected out of a film. Mm-hmm. The audience was getting younger and younger, and I had no idea that their interests were turning more and more to comic book-like films, right. of which Star Wars was the first.
So what happened with your movie?
Well, it had a very brief run and then disappeared. And then it went to Europe, where the film was financed by 2 major film companies in America, Paramount and Universal. Mm-hmm. And they had joint distribution with one company called Cinema International Corporation in Europe. And the CIC operated kind of separately from Paramount and Universal, and they had the distribution of the film in Europe and in other parts of the world, South America.
Right.
And the film had the same basic response in every country. It was universally declaimed. It was not acclaimed, it was declaimed. I never believed this reaction. I always felt that the film was great, and I still do. Mm-hmm. I think it's a great film. Mm-hmm. Is it the best film ever made? I couldn't say that. No, but I thought it was the best that I could do. Mm. And at that time, in the middle to late 70s, almost everything that I had done, as you point out, was successful. And I felt that Sorcerer was the best I could possibly do. So when it was not going to become a financial success, there is absolutely no substitute in terms of critical success. So if the critics had loved it, but the audience didn't, it would be a failure. It was based on the novel The Wages of Fear by Georges Arnaud, a French novelist, and the film of that by H.G. Clouseau.
But why
So-
this story? That's my
Because
question.
the story was, to me, about the mystery of fate.
Okay.
The role that fate plays in the lives of all of us.
Right.
And I had made a film in The Exorcist about the mystery of faith. And I now wanted to make a film that had no supernatural element to it, but was about the mystery of fate. The fact that somebody can walk across the street feeling in the peak of health and get hit by a car.
Right.
That we have no control over our destinies. And that was my feeling at the time.
Right.
I wanted to do a film about people who seemed to have control of their destinies. They were each successful at what they did. There were 4 characters who were not very nice people. And that was another thing I decided to do. Not do this story with heroic figures, with Superman,
Right.
with guys in spandex suits. But I wanted to do it with guys who were not considered good people, like an Arab terrorist was one of the lead characters. A Frenchman who embezzles funds from his father-in-law's company and has to leave France. An American who is the driver for a group of hold-up men, robbers who rob a church, and he's the driver. And the 4th man was a hired killer. The novel was pretty much the equivalent of a kind of an American noir novel, like by someone like James M. Cain or Jim Thompson. You know, it was lean, tough, and very existential.
Right.
The film was as well. And I thought highly of the work of H.G. Clouseau, and I love the film. I did not want to duplicate what he had done, except to take the same theme, but 4 different characters and completely different events, except for the fact that these 4 men were in 2 trucks driving loads of dynamite to an oil well fire. I took the same basic story as you would if you were doing Hamlet.
Right.
But you could do Hamlet in modern dress, you could do it in a different setting, whatever. And that's how I chose to do Sorcerer, which was based on Le Salaire de la Peur, Wages of Fear. And here's the point.
Right.
This was about the idea, which I felt was extremely valid at that point in my life. And that was the fact that each of the countries of the world were beginning to enter a conflict. And yet nuclear energy, the ability to explode the entire world, had come into being. And the world was endangered and threatened by the possibility that it would blow up if the nations of the world did not cooperate. If they didn't cooperate, even though they didn't like each other or like each other's policies, they would all blow up together. And that thought struck me very powerfully around that point in my life.
You come back to Los Angeles. How do you get a movie like this financed?
Oh, at that time, they would have financed my nephew's bar mitzvah if I wanted them to do that. And budget was of no concern. The actors weren't, although initially I had the possibility of 4 or 3 international stars.
And what happened?
Plus Amadou, who was always, I had seen Amadou and then met him when I went to France for The Exorcist. I had seen him in a Claude Lelouch film called Love, Life, Death. L'amour, la vie, la mort. And I thought he was a great actor. He's Moroccan. And I wrote that part for him. We wrote the other roles for Steve McQueen. I knew Steve McQueen, and he and I wanted to work together. And then for the other two characters, I was going to have Marcello Mastroianni and Lino Ventura. I spoke to them, and Amadou. And that was my cast. The man who owned Paramount then was a Viennese man named Charlie Bludorn, who was one of the first of the new moguls.
Okay.
And he is a guy who put together a company that was made up of many separate parts. He owned tobacco fields. He owned a good portion of the Dominican Republic. He owned both the sugar fields and the refineries in the Dominican Republic. He virtually controlled the Dominican Republic. Right. And he said to me, look, if you'll shoot the portion of your film that's in the jungle and in these, in the depressed cities, I have that in the Dominican Republic, and I'll co-finance the film, or I'll finance the whole film.
Okay, so Universal says this budget is expensive or too high. Like, what was the budget coming in at Universal?
I think the actual budget at the time was about $12 to $15 million.
Oh, was that a lot back then?
It was, well, the French Connection had cost $1.8 million, to give you some ideas, a few years before. And the French Connection had gone $300,000 over budget.
And The Exorcist?
And The Exorcist cost about $8 million.
Okay.
Because I shot it forever. I shot The Exorcist for a year.
Okay. So now you have this budget, and you had hired a very good writer. Was there a specific reason for this writer? Oh,
he was one of the most intelligent people I'd ever known.
Right.
We worked in documentaries together before I ever did a feature film.
Okay, so you reached out to this writer.
He spoke 8 languages.
Okay.
He's we've done a lot of work together.
Okay, so you had a great team.
He wrote the script of The Wild Bunch.
Oh.
The Sam Peckinpah movie.
Right. So you had a great team to start with. You had a great writer. There was you as a producer-director. You had a great cast, and you had $15 million. Then it went to Paramount. Did Paramount co-finance the 14
Yeah,
to
they
15?
co-financed the film.
And what happened to the stars then?
We wrote the script for Steve McQueen. And I talked with Steve McQueen. I told him what I was doing. He said, it sounds great, and I can't wait to read the script. The minute we had our first draft, I sent it to Steve, and he called me, and he said, this is the best script I've ever read. I'll do this. But you've got to do certain things for me. What? He said, you know, I've just married Ally McGraw. And he said, so if you can't, I can't just bring her with me on what's going to be a long journey. You got to write in a part for her. And I said, you just told me it was the best script you ever read. There is no major role for a woman. I'd have to rewrite the script to write a part for your wife. It's not that I don't like her. I like her very much, but there's nothing in the script for a woman. Very small part for a French woman. And he said, okay. He said, make her an executive producer so she can come with me and she's got a job on the film, not just my wife. And I said, executive producer, that's a bullshit title. I don't believe in that title, and I'm not going to give her any authority over anything, you know. So I'm not going to have somebody around who's got a phony title. He said, okay. He said, shoot the entire film in America. Now, I had chosen these other locations, in part because of Gulf and Western and Bludorn and his basic ownership of the Dominican Republic.
So you had a great deal in place going in.
And I loved the locations. And I said, Steve, I can't find stuff like that in America. He said, I'm sure it exists. I said, I don't really want to go on a location search. I found the locations I want. So I had turned him down on all three of the points. And I said, oh, who needs Steve McQueen?
Okay, so Steve McQueen falls apart.
Roy Scheider was available. He had just recently done Jaws. I had worked with him in The French Connection.
But there was some issue in The Exorcist, correct, with you?
Oh, well, no, he wanted to do The Exorcist, but the guy who wrote it didn't think he was sympathetic.
Right.
As the young priest. And I sort of agreed with him.
So were there issues between you and Roy Scheider?
Well, Roy, no, not issues, but Roy wasn't happy.
Right.
That I didn't go to bat for him.
Right.
And I explained to him that it wasn't really my choice.
So why after, so just again, so Steve McQueen falls apart, you decide on Roy Scheider.
Well, here's why. A, he was available. He was the lead in Jaws.
Right.
And Universal loved him.
Okay, so it was a win-win.
Oh, yeah. They said, you don't have Steve McQueen? Too bad. Roy Scheider? Fine.
Would they have financed the movie with an unknown actor, do you think?
No.
Okay, so you needed a star.
Now, Roy wasn't a star, but he was well known. Mastroianni was told by his then wife, Catherine Deneuve, as he told me. Now, I wasn't there, but Mastroianni had a child with Catherine Deneuve. And she, according to him, said to him, you can't go away on a movie for 6 months. I'm not going to let our daughter go with you to these weird places, and you will lose a great deal of custody over your daughter. He reluctantly withdrew. Bruno Cremer had something of a reputation, not large, in France. Mm-hmm. And later he played Inspector Maigret on French television for, I think, at least 10 years.
Okay, and the other guys?
And Francisco Rabal, who took the other part, was, again, very well known in places like Spain. He was Spanish, mm-hmm. and he was known in Spain, Italy, Germany, not known at all in the United States. There are no heroes. Every one of us is flawed. Every human being I've ever met or known, especially me, is a flawed human being.
But the four characters in
And
Sorcerer,
sometimes they can step up and do something very good. Now, if you read the works of, for example, St. Augustine, who wrote his Confessions, or Jean-Jacques Rousseau, these were very flawed people who wrote about their flaws, who wrote about their sins, and how they eventually found a way out of it through God.
right?
Especially St. Augustine, who when he was young was a thief, a scoundrel. He had relations with women and just moved on. He writes about all this.
But it's interesting you bring that up because part of the journey of Sorcerer, the Roy Scheider character, becomes almost metaphysical near the end. There's almost like, in a way, a religious element to that.
The guys in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, they are bad.
Right.
They start good, and then, since the film is about greed, they all become greedy. Mm-hmm. They all let greed take them over, with the possible exception of the Walter Houston character, who was the old prospector. Yeah. But the lead guy, Bogart, is a very bad individual who will kill his partners to take their share of the money.
Was that an inspiring movie for you?
Oh, yes. That's one of the greatest films I had ever seen.
So you almost...
If I could one day make a film as good as Treasure of Sierra Madre, I would quit.
Okay.
I would absolutely quit right there.
How did you come up with that title?
Oh, I was listening to a Miles Davis album called Sorcerer. And I thought, hey, that sounds like a good title. I love the album. And I thought that was a good title. And I also realized at the time that what a sorcerer, in fact, was an evil wizard.
Right.
And in the case of the film, I thought the evil wizard was fate, that controlled the lives of all these people, no matter how heroic they were, or terrified, or adventuresome, or desperate, that their lives were out of their control. The bridge scene, which is one of the most difficult scenes I think that may ever have been filmed, as far as I know.
Did you actually put the trucks on the
yeah,
bridge?
Yeah, of course.
Because that's one of the amazing things when I rewatched it was that seeing those metal machines on that, like even getting them out there. And there were there stuntmen or were there the actors?
Both.
Okay, so
the actors are there's no opticals in the film.
Okay.
The actors are, when you see them driving the trucks, they're driving the trucks.
When would you use stunt
mostly
people?
for the close-ups.
And when would you use stunt people?
In the long shots.
Okay,
when you
so you
couldn't
would use
see
stunt. Okay.
who is. And the stunt coordinator was Bud Eakins, who was McQueen's stunt double and stunt coordinator.
Because that bridge scene is the editorial, especially when he falls underwater, the use of sound going away, it's magical. It's absolutely magnificent.
Thank you.
Absolutely, it's untouchable. Again, you know, it's so
I know it's a good scene.
It's an incredible. No, it's not. It's an incredible scene.
It was fun to do. I did not have a storyboard for the bridge scene, but I had all of it in my mind's eye.
Right.
I had everything. I saw the movie in my head, and so going out to film it was only difficult from a physical standpoint, not from the standpoint of what to do when. I knew how I was going to start that scene, end that scene, what the individual moments would be, and I just went out and filmed what was in my mind's eye. The greatest cinema, to me, was made in the silent era.
Right.
And you could run Buster Keaton's movies or Charlie Chaplin or D.W. Griffith's films anywhere, and people knew what was going on.
Were you megalomania when you were making the movie?
I don't know what that word means.
Okay, but were you all consuming?
Yeah,
were you
probably.
Basically world dominance, that this was going to play every single
No, it's just a movie. All I was a movie director who had a concept and was bound and determined to fulfill that concept.
Yes, but this is
not
looking back.
Rule
but back
the world.
Then, it seems like you wanted to rule the world.
No, never. I don't have these fantasies that you have. Why do you attribute your fantasies to me? One day, Lou Wasserman and Sid Sheinberg said, look, when you do get a cut that you like, Sid Sheinberg was head of the motion picture department at Universal, and Wasserman was the overall boss. And they said, one day when you have a cut that you like, can we look at it? And in those days, they could only look at it on what was called a Chem editing machine,
right.
A Keller editing machine, German made. And it wasn't the kind of digital editing facilities we have now. It was, you put up a reel of film and a reel of sound with a sync mark on both. You'd sync them up and run double system on a screen about this big.
Action?
They loved it.
They loved it.
They thought it was great.
Right.
And Sheinberg said to me, I'll never forget this conversation. He said, how much do you think we're going to do? And The Exorcist by then had taken in $100 million domestic. It has since taken in over $800 million with all the different media. But it was $100 million, and there was no DVD, there was no Blu-ray or anything like that, no television. So because The Exorcist had taken in $100 million, and I thought this was a better film than The Exorcist. Mm-hmm. I remember saying to him, I think it'll take it maybe $90 million.
Going in.
Yeah, and he said, wow, yeah, it's great. He said, it's great. And they then set out plans to distribute it.
So then what happened?
They had no doubts when they distributed it.
Okay, so
here's one doubt they had.
Well, what there's
all the foreign names bothered them. And I remember this conversation. Sheinberg said to me, in looking at the ad, it said Roy Scheider, then it said Bruno Cremer, Francisco Rabal, Amadou, and Wasserman said, geez, there's a lot of foreign names in this ad. And I said, look, if you want, I'll go to them and ask them to change their names. How's that? I have a question for you. Why do you want to dwell on the dark side?
Because
There's so much more to that film than all of the politics, the chicanery, the practical jokes. All of those things were peripheral to the making of a film like
but see,
that.
but
It's like my asking Orson Welles when he made Citizen Kane, did you have good dinners then? Or did you get laid a lot?
no,
Or,
that's not, no, because what I'm interested
no, I mean,
in,
who cares?
no, that's the point. That's actually the most interesting point.
What?
Because I'm interested in the thought, what goes through an artist's
I've already
mind,
told you.
which I am getting to now. Knowing
Geez, we've only been here for a fucking
hour and a half.
I don't think there were any things I could have changed. I made the film I wanted to make.
Okay.
Now, to this day, as we're sitting here, today is February 23rd, is it? I have no regrets. Stanley Kubrick never won an Academy Award. Alfred Hitchcock never won an Academy Award. Orson Welles never won an Academy Award
I'm in a
except
good
for
group.
screenplay.
I'm in a good group.
No, so I'm saying to you, you know, these are judgments that were made by audiences and critics at the time.
If Sorcerer had made a lot of money, your life would have been changed.
Not
but
much.
it didn't,
No.
as you say.
No, not much. I mean, and frankly...
You call yourself the wound that it gave you. It hurted you.
What?
The failure of Sorcerer back then.
I would, look, they're far worse. I've recently lost a number of friends. That's what really hurts. Not everyone likes Sorcerer. I have not been able to convert the world. There's no film ever made. You know, I don't think that a film like, I don't think much of a lot of films that are called masterpieces. I don't like a lot of Kubrick's films at all, but I think that he has made some of the greatest films ever made. See, one of the things I hear that people like about it is that everything that you see, we did. They're not generated on a computer. We didn't do these effects, scenes, adventures that we had on a computer. Let me express to you what I think is the good and bad of Sorcerer. I basically believe, and there's some of this in the film, but I basically believe that a film operates much like a dream. A film is a dream. You know, it's not real people up there. It's projected images that are running at either 24 frames a second or running at a different speed in the digital world. It's like visions, nightmares, dreams that you get in, not often in your waking hours. And most of the great films operate like dreams. Sorcerer operates on a plane of reality. It's all meant to look and be real, and it is. There's no camera tricks. The bridge is the bridge. The blowing up of the big tree, or when a bank blows up, it's all, we did that. Everything. And one of the reasons it may not have been successful, although today it may have entered a different realm, but at the time it was not about dreams. When I say a film operates like dreams, I'm talking about films like 2001, like Citizen Kane, like a handful of films that draw from an audience endless emotions, fear, joy, sorrow, tears, laughter. Those things are in another realm.